is it, guys. 2019 is basically over, and this is also the final episode of the World Athletics Club for this year. Tom, between you and I think we've covered at least 30 athletics meets this year, and what a year it's been.
Yeah, so many highlights from across the year. As you say, we've been to so many events this year, and it's hard to pick a favourite moment, but for me, I'm probably looking at the multi-events in Doha. An amazing win for Nicholas Carl and, of course, Katarina Johnson-Thompson in the heptathlon. What about you? What would be a highlight?
I mean, you've taken Nicholas there. I'm glad you did, because, as you know, I was bawling my eyes out for that competition. But I think not necessarily a moment of the year, but Joshua Cheptegei winning in Aarhus at the World Cross, taking the Diamond League title in Zurich, and then becoming world champion in Doha. To me, that just shows what an amazing athlete he is, and that really is one of the highlights. We got together last month at the awards, and that was a pretty impressive night as well.
Yeah, what a night it was, where we discovered who the athletes of the year were, as well as the top coaches and characters from across the sport in 2019. Let's take a look at some of the highlights from the night in Monaco.
World Athletics Female Athlete of the Year is Delilah Muhammad.
So thankful to be here. I'm so thankful for my coach and all my supporters, my family. It's been a tough year, and it just came home excellently.
Athletics Male Athlete of the Year is Eliud Kipchoge.
Because cross technology is working, and he's on the line from Kenya, and we can talk to him now. Eliud, are you there?
It was really special. The day was really cool. I'm happy to be the first human being to run under 2 hours, and I hope I inspired a lot of generation. It was about human family, and I trust that from today onwards, everybody will be positive in life, and in general, I'm really happy for making history.
What an amazing night that was, and what an incredible season we've had. And the one event that really stood out for everyone this year was the 400-metre hurdles. And because of that, I just thought I'd get myself our two world champions from Doha, who both dominated the year. Delilah and Carsten, thanks for coming. I'm going to start with you, Delilah. When you look at your entire season, how it panned out, when you ran your first 4 hurdles race of the year, did you think it would result in the result that you had in Doha?
Well, I definitely think it's something I would want. You never know how the year is going to pan out. My first race, I did think it was one of my better openers, and I definitely thought it would be a good year.
Carsten, there's been a lot of talk in particular about the men's hurdles and the rivalries between you and Rai and Samba. You said at some point you were just getting annoyed with it, weren't you?
It was like it's... what I said was going to happen in some way, because everybody was talking about a world record in Doha, and we were pretty far from that. We were half a second, so Delilah saved the 400-meter hurdles in Doha.
If you look on the Diamond League circuit in particular, how things have been building up for you, and then of course you have trials as well, how important is it to get loads of races actually in before the championships to get into that right rhythm?
I guess it's different for every person. For me, I always say I don't need a lot of races. This year, I think somewhere in the middle in terms of the races, the number of races that I did, but it's important. Obviously you want to have that step pattern on, and obviously the Diamond League helps us do that. But I love training. I think that's the part for me that's just like what I love doing.
Carsten, what about you? Do you love training or do you love racing?
I can agree with the training part. I think it's probably the most important part as well, because that is where you remove the level. But at the same time, I think it's nice for me to have some competitions to feel the level and to perform under pressure. And the competition is also training, just with very, very high quality. So I see it mostly as the same thing, but you got to prioritize and do the competitions so you can handle it.
How important is it to prepare for different outcomes? Like, we were having a chat about this before in terms of not getting thrown off if something doesn't necessarily go according to plan.
I think for me, it's just kind of focusing on it in training and kind of preparing for what could possibly go wrong. I think so much we're in our head, though, and I kind of love his style of racing, actually. I mean, from what it looks like from a spectator, he looks like he just goes for it, and I've definitely been trying to kind of incorporate that for me this year, because when things do go wrong, when you're so planned and so, focused on a finite number, you can't really prepare for that. So when you're just going for it, it's just, I think it's probably better.
What about you, Carsten?
The same in some way, but for me, it's like what I like about running the Diamond Leagues and the other meets is that you can try out different things. I don't feel like it's that much of a risk, but when you're in the World Championships, you gotta really perform in the finals, and you don't have really another choice. But I like to try different things and find a way to run. And for me, the patterns is always a mystery, and I'm trying to find my way still.
So Dalila just said that your kind of racing style inspired her in a way, and you said you saw she basically saved the 400 hurdles this year. How much have you been actually following the women's side?
A lot. I'm really a fan of athletics in a whole, and especially following the hurdles, because that's what I do. And I also train with a lot of 400-meter hurdles women, so I like to follow it. And the level now it's crazy. They're running 52, and it's another ball game. I love it.
How hard is it after a season like this? It's been pretty long for everyone to then obviously relax and then find your way back into training.
It was hard to I just think the idea of it was kind of hard to kind of go back into training after such a long year. It's just like one of the longest years I've had as a professional. But I've trained for 2 weeks now, and once I kind of got back into it, I was in it, and it's been fine.
Carsten, what's your off-season been like?
I actually trained my way through the off-season, because I think it's so hard to get it going again if I totally stop. So my experience is to just keep the rhythm going. But of course, I had some nice and quiet days. I actually took some vacation in Doha as well, and it's just been great. And you need to refuel and get your motivation and energy back. So I think I used the off-season pretty well.
Dalila, what about you?
Same, definitely. I went on a beautiful trip to Montana. I loved it, every bit of it. Just took enjoy in that time, and yeah, I loved it.
It's quite interesting, because we had a conversation just before we started here on the show about how differently your winter training looks, because for you it's nice and warm and you'll have to find the warmth or just train through the cold, Carsten.
In Norway we actually have winter, so for me it's literally winter training, and we gotta find our way through the snow and find a way to train, and we mostly do it indoors. So we find a way, but you gotta be creative. It's not easy every day.
I was complaining yesterday that it was 55 degrees in California, so that's as cold as it gets for us.
Now, one thing that we asked everyone who's on the show, or that we're going to ask everyone that's on the show, is what's been your favourite moment of the year? It doesn't have to be of you personally, but also because both of you are fans of the sport to witness.
Oh man, what has been my favourite moment?
My favourite moment was your world record in Doha.
Well, thank you.
I think it was awesome, because it's so fast, So I loved watching it, and taking a world record in the championships, that is something else.
Where were you? Out of interest, were you in the stadium? Were you watching?
I actually saw it on TV. I love watching athletics on TV. That is probably the best way to view it.
Yeah, interesting. What about you, Dalila?
I guess it's just been so many moments. Well, obviously, I do love my moment in Doha. I think, I loved his race as well. Another one that kind of stood out for me was the women's 400 hurdles. I really loved to watch Nia kind of win that, and just bringing it home, just being a mom, and I just thought that was really inspiring.
No, you two really inspired a lot of people, and your races have been amazing. And we've actually got some highlights of those two races, and we're going to take a look back at those.
So rarely in life do three all-time greats converge in the same era. They have tonight, and it might, just might, take a world record to win it. This is the men's 400 metres World Championship final. 3 of the 4 fastest in history. And it's Varholm with the edge from Benjamin. McMaster on the inside running well. Varholm's beginning to tire, and Benjamin's trying to close. Watch the clock, it's going to be fast. Karsten Varholm defends the title, 47.44. It was sensational. Not a world record, but a performance of real heart, of real guts, of real courage. His is a name we will remember for generations to come. Is the final of the women's 400 metres hurdles. What a privilege to be here in Doha and witness a lineup of this quality. Sprunger's gone out hard on the outside, so too has Dalilah Muhammad, and Sydney McLaughlin already up on Clayton. It's the 2 Americans at the moment, but which one has saved enough? That's Muhammad. Looks so smooth as she closed down on Hainover outsider. Little stutter there from McLaughlin. Remember to watch the clock here. It might take something very, very special to take this title. Lovely bend from Dalilah Muhammad, but can she hang on? McLaughlin's beginning to close. The Olympic champion, the world record holder, has the edge. Has the youngster got enough in the tank in the closing stages? It's getting tight, but remember, Muhammad's never won this title. Muhammad on the line, and it's a new world record.
2 amazing athletes, 1 incredible season for both. 2 amazing men joining me here, Dan Vernon and Patrick Smith from Getty. Guys, you travelled across the world to capture some of the top moments in our sport, and I think between the 2 of you, you've covered our 3 top WAS events. Dan, I'm going to start off with you. You were in Aarhus with us.
Yes.
We asked both of you to pick out some of your favourite shots of the season.
Yeah.
And there's one of Joshua Cheptegei, I think, that you picked.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for me it was, well, more for Joshua, but for me it was quite an emotional moment seeing Joshua train over the last few years and following his journey. 2 years earlier in Kampala, he'd had quite a tough experience at the World Cross. So for him, it was just complete redemption, and you could see that in his face. I'm not sort of normally a fan of finish line shots, so to speak, but I think with this one, you see that it's not just Joshua celebrating; it's the entire nation. And I think you saw it in the World Champs as well. When a Ugandan wins, they all win. So I think it was the 800 metres of the girls. You know, it was a celebration that you're celebrating as much as the person that got the medal, and it felt like that in Uganda, that the whole squad was behind him. And like I say, massive redemption for Joshua to set off what was an incredible season.
Absolutely, and I think the interesting thing is you said you're not a fan of the celebration, the finish line shots necessarily, and the other picture that you picked from the next WAS event of this year is from Yokohama in the World Relays.
Yeah, definitely. This is actually, I think this is one of the qualifying events. I think it was the semi here, and I think for me, what I remember from Yokohama was the colour. It was the most vibrant event, I think, for me of the year. So I decided to pick an image that reflected that, with all the colours of the different nations. And I mean, me and Patrick will both be looking for lines, curves, anything to lead the eye. And I think for this one, it's quite a classic, I suppose. But her face, her expression, the intensity of the event, and fighting for your nation, I think hopefully this shows that.
I think that's really, really interesting to hear for the non-experienced photographer amongst us. Patrick, you were in Doha then, moved on to the big one, the World Championships. And I mean, this moment really travelled around the world in the men's race there. Can you just quickly talk us through that?
Yeah, I think as anyone, a fan, spectator, athletes, and as a photographer, moments like these resonate forever. They're historic. Even between us as photographers, we're competing. So to help another human being in a moment of being down, needing a little bit of help, is just very special. And looking through the lens, you know that. And it's one of those moments where it was really slow. It took a long time to come around that last bend. But you take more pictures in a moment like this than you do maybe in a 100-meter final, because of the special moment of it.
Now, one of the other pictures that you picked out is, you just said, this one was really slow, this looks really fast.
Well, in the retrospect, this one is really slow. It's using a slow shutter speed to get an effect like this. It's a classic shot that I think we've all played with and gone after. and it's really difficult to get one athlete sharp and one athlete in focus. But it just goes to show how fast this sport is, how exciting it is, and that's either in the beginning of the race or at the end of the race.
So you said fast, exciting, it's also emotional, and I think this shot there of Deanna Price winning the hammer throw really sums that up.
You're absolutely right. A picture like this is a picture that's worth 1,000 words, as cliche as it is. She was the first American to win a hammer in a championship level, and she certainly let it all out and gave that excitement and showed it to the crowd and for herself. And that's another moment where, as a photographer, you're shooting it and you feel for them. And after you put the camera down, you go, wow, that was really special. That was an amazing moment, an amazing performance.
So, of course, yes, those were our World Athletics main events, but there were also other great events. And one of the ones that you traveled to was Lima, Peru for the Pan American Games. And this shot, I think, it's just, I mean, I don't even know how to describe it, Patrick.
You know, I was thinking a lot about this picture, and it's one of my favorites of the year. And athletics and photography go hand in hand. There's a lot of preparation, there's a lot of being perfect. Sometimes like this with Priscilla Frederick, it's not showing your emotion. It's not getting too elated, it's not getting too down. And you get 3 attempts, you might get more attempts. You have semi-heats in the running. And I think as photographers, we get the same thing because we don't always get the shot in the first time. So seeing her beauty go over the high jump, it was trying to get that perfection that she was doing the scene.
And then finally, I think that's another one of those that just shows so much emotion there, again, from Lima.
Yeah, Santos, a lot of talk going into Lima, going into the Worlds. And as you mentioned, finish line pictures are always the kinds of ones that you know you're going to get something. And you're kind of desensitized to it a little bit as a photographer because if it's a close race and you get it, it feels good because it's such a tight race. But he just took the lead and took a commanding charge and just let it all out, tongue out, arms out. I think that's what we all want to do. Even as we get a great picture, we want to do that too, right? You know what I mean? And that's how I felt.
Dan, you were involved in something that really captured the imagination of people around the world. And I think you've picked a selection of images that really illustrates that journey. There's the first one. Just talk us through the process of leading into Eliud Kipchoge's sub-2 attempt.
I mean, for me, it's been a 3-year process following Eliud and the rest of his group. So it's been quite an intense journey, an emotional journey, but there's an element in their training of repetitiveness. So when with images like this is a route they do probably every 2, maybe 3 weeks at an enormous 40k run right high up in, this is almost 3,000 meters. So, you know, you can feel it when you're up there, but for me, it's less about getting close to them sometimes in training and try and just show them where they are because, you know, on a course, on the track, everything's tight, everything's close up. But for here, I just wanted to show this is everything. This is every single run we go on. This is the sort of view, the mist when you get up high. It's just an incredible experience to follow their journey and yeah, just be quite close to something that was never going to happen again, really. Yeah.
And you mentioned there the journey there, and then of course the few days building up to that Saturday, that morning, the mist in training, and then interestingly on race day itself in the morning, it was misty as well.
Absolutely,
and we can see that in that shot that you picked.
Yeah, I've never experienced anything quite like that morning. It was strange. I remember going to Eliud's room, it must have been 5 a.m, and he was just sat there having his breakfast, and I opened the curtains and I said, "It's misty out," and he went, "Yeah, it's okay. It's okay." Because for us, it was, right, that's instant humidity, that's, you know, an issue, but he just took it all in his stride. He absolutely didn't care about anything. But when we got up onto the bridge there, it was something surreal because you're over the river, you should be able to see the city on the other side, but it was like this scene out of Blade Runner or something, really odd, quite surreal experience. No fans up on the top point of the bridge at that point, so it was just a sight I've never really seen in athletics, and I mean that goes for the whole event, really.
And you said there, the start there was no fans, but as soon as they moved over that bridge, I couldn't believe being there how early the crowds turned out. They were flocking down there, and I think that picture that you've picked there, it's the movement, you can really see that.
Yeah, again, like Patrick was saying before, trying to isolate an athlete when you're trying to use a slow shutter speed like that is really hard, especially when you only want one, essentially, you know, like, so it was, with this, it was quite a strange experience because normally you move around a marathon course trying to pick your spots, but with this one, it was just a case of me going from the start to the finish and gradually working my way up, and every time he passed me, trying to find something different that looked different to the last shot you took. But that one hopefully sort of represents how important the paces were to him and the enormous crowds that lined the entire, 9.6 kilometre loop, I think.
And speaking of the paces, I think this final shot that you selected there, it shows what a monumental team effort this was. Yes, it was an individual sport, but look at this.
Yeah, I mean, that I've been to music gigs that were nowhere near as intense as that moment there. I mean, it felt like there were a few hundred people just squashed in together, but the paces were an incredibly important part for Elliot. But not just the paces, the extended team. I mean, this was, you saw it on race week. It was hundreds of people that had dedicated 7 months of their lives to this project, and you could really experience that. We had meetings every night where everyone would be piled into this room and you just saw the breadth of knowledge, of experience. And I asked him when we were in Kenya last week, I was talking to him about how that felt being the only person, that everyone was there for just him. You know, when he arrived at the hotel, he saw the whole structure, everything. It was purely for him, and he really sort of let out how nervous he was because of that. And he could see that this was about one man, and I think it must have, you know, been quite an intense experience. So I asked him what was the overriding experience, emotion when you crossed the line, and it was relief. And that's what he said. It was relief that he'd made it, that everyone that had invested the time and effort into the project, he'd rewarded them for that. And then you can see just him being held aloft by God knows how many people, but yeah, it was an incredible moment.
That was really interesting. I mean, some of it I knew, a lot of it I didn't know. I also didn't have a clue how hard it is or how emotional you get. It's relieving to know that I'm not the only one who does that. We've heard from the photographers, but another part or some other people that are very important in following the sport over the course of the season are broadcasters. And Tom went to catch up with Steve Cram and Alison Kirbishley to hear how their season turned out.
Thank you, Michelle. We are here with Alison Kirbishley, Steve Cram, both reporters for the BBC, probably amongst the most well-travelled of the BBC correspondents that there are.
Yeah,
and
he does better air miles than me, though.
You're keeping a total of them, are you, as you go?
I'm almost reaching that lifetime total where you go into the top bracket, the gold bracket. And I'm old, and yes, I've done a lot of air miles over the years, yeah, but getting there.
So when we think of 2019, you've seen so much of it from front row seats. A kind of an Atletico's dream, as it were. But looking back on the year, what kind of stands out? What do you think of 2019 athletics, maybe if you were reflecting in the future?
I think it was actually quite a difficult year for a lot of the athletes. You know, I wear two hats, I guess, because I coach as well. So, you know, I coach Laura Waitman, who's, you know, one of the top middle distance and now 5,000 metre runners. So you look at the year, how it's going to pan out. So there was always this Doha is very late in the season. So that gave a lot of the big name athletes some real tough choices around indoor season, things like World Cross if you're a distance runner, then into the Diamond League season, which inevitably, you know, we were in Doha very early May, and then a long summer right the way through to the World Champs. So it was a challenging year, and bearing in mind that the Olympics are going to be following on. So I think actually we ended up with a pretty stellar season, which I wasn't necessarily expecting. I thought it might have been a little bit down because of the challenges of planning your season and planning it through to the Olympics, but it was phenomenal.
Yeah, and certainly as a fan, not only just working in sport, I think this whole thing of finishing on the champs, and so even the Diamond League finals, then going in a couple of weeks later to the major champs and seeing the performances that we saw there. I think for me, 2019 was head-to-heads, wasn't it? We had some amazing head-to-heads in so many of the events. And I think more than ever, I just seem to be able to be there for them. And yeah, as athletic fans, that's what you want, you know. And then the performances come out of those head-to-heads as well.
I think you're so right there that the whole season was geared towards that World Championships, and there was a lot of question marks over what can the athletes do. A lot of the athletes had question marks over their own performances going into that meet, and yet the performances spoke for themselves, didn't they?
Yeah.
So is that something that maybe you'd say it was a win? The scheduling was a success this year?
I mean, and I think, there was so much about where we were taking it, the support, all of that. But actually the performances for me ended up kind of shouting louder than any of that, because when I think about that night, the pole vault, both pole vault finals, to be honest, high jump, Barshim. I mean, that was incredible. We'd already just gone off air. And I was like, on my seat doing everything you shouldn't do in the media tribune, kind of being a fan. And it was just epic. There was just so much drama and excitement, which is exactly what, if you're going to script a world champs, that's what you want.
Let's go back to indoors that you just touched upon, because the European indoors held in Glasgow, close to both your homes.
Yeah.
But outside of that European bubble, there was also the big battle between Yomif Gajelcha and Samuel Teferi, who seems to be swapping world record attempts over the 15 and the mile. That stands out for me, but what for you guys stands out indoors?
I think certainly sort of starting to see KJT, Katarina Johnson-Thompson, start to emerge as this sort of, everybody has been expecting of her for so long. And I think Tiam getting injured kind of then started to get everyone thinking, well, what's the rest of the year going to look like? But constantly referring back to the fact that there was so long to go until the World Champs in October. So that, Laura Muir, I think, she was in her hometown of Glasgow, she's born to run indoors, that lady, she's just beautiful to watch. She's just like a metronome. And I think just starting to see new stars emerge. And like you said, Kajelcha, not many people really behind Gebrselassie Bekele, starting to get some, and I don't think enough people know about Kajelcha. I met him for the first time to talk to at one of the Diamond Leagues, just sat in the dinner hall with him. His English is fantastic. He's got a real cheeky character about him. And that's what you want. You want to come out to athletic fans and to people that maybe don't get a chance to hear him talk enough,
I really did enjoy the middle distance indoor season, partly because of Laura, partly because of Kajelcha as well. And they were my highlights. And I think it almost led quite nicely straight into the World Cross Country, because there was then people who had been competing indoors, some who were just coming to the World Cross from their normal background, if you like. And we've got that great mix of people at the cross country championships as well.
You ran cross country as well.
I ran one World Cross Country, which was in the juniors, which was in Ireland, in Limerick, and
right.
It was much more traditional. It was on like a horse race course. The grass was long, it was muddy, and I liked cross country. I was better on the roads. My sort of running action wasn't good for country, but and it's nice that a lot of the big track runners are coming back to cross country. I mean, some of them have never left it, but to see Helen Obiri and Cheptegei there, and many others, is good. And, is actually, if you look at someone like Helen, I think that performance for her, she's had a period where she wasn't always finding she's been brilliant, and then she's had 3 or 4 years where she's almost been and to see her come back and win the World Cross was phenomenal, in a great race as well. Yeah. So, but I liked the idea that they've managed to find something that not only looked visually interesting on television, because that's a challenge with cross country sometimes, but it was still a real challenge of a course for people, because we've kind of over the years, sometimes if we want television to have a good a way of covering it, shorter lap, and we kind of, let's attract the track runners, we'll make it faster, we'll not make it as tough. And I think this was a great balance. I think it was the right balance. We got 2 great track specialists, one on a tough course, but looked spectacular on TV as well. So I think it was a great example of you can combine all of those elements with a bit of imagination and a bit of innovation as well. So yeah, well done. They did a great job.
Let's move on to the Diamond League season. Let's get onto the track and field. What stands out for you? What maybe male and female performance of the Diamond League?
I think for me, the Monaco Diamond League again, with the distance guys, Sifan, was just phenomenal. The meet itself was brilliant, but that performance for me was breathtaking. And of course, then what she went on to do at the Worlds, again, a special double, whether we'll ever see that double again. I'm glad that she chose that double. It would have been almost too easy to do the 10-5. So I think...
I think that it's really hard to pick individual things. There were some special moments all over the Diamond League season. I remember Lisek in Lausanne with 6 meters, and there was you've got obviously Karsten Warholm in the 400 hurdles with Benjamin. You could probably almost go through their whole series of either of them, their season, and then. Obviously the 400 hurdles women was the big performances were away from the Diamond League, but nonetheless it was still a great race. It was just one of those years where wherever you looked in whatever event there seemed to be performances and drama. So I was really pleased that a lot of the big names of our sport did big performances in the Diamond League and followed that through with world titles and big performances in Doha. And I admire them for doing that. That's not easy. It's not easy to come out bang in May, big times, big jumps, big throws, and 4 or 5 months later still be at the top of your game.
And throws. The one that stands out is the men's shot put this year for me, because those guys were on beyond 22 meters. Basically, 2 or 3 of them you could rely on them. Hang your hat. Diamond League is going to be running 22:40 odd, whatever. Could you have ever expected that final in Doha?
I think we were still reeling, because what else was on that night? Was that the pole vault night as well? There was 2 or 3, or was it Barshim that night? There was 2 or 3, like wherever you looked in the stadium, and it was like, but did you see the shot put? I mean, how many world champions would be walking out the doors just talking about the shot put, the phenomenal shot put? And I think
this is what when athletics is at its best, at its very best, it's when you get 2 or 3 people at the top of their game, not one. I mean, hey, look, we love, when Usain was around and you Usain's going to win. What time will he run? And you get people who dominate. But when you get the head-to-heads are great, but if they're at a level which is not quite, but suddenly you get 2, 3, 4 people that are at the top of their game, almost world record level, and any one of 2 or 3 could win, as you said. That's what's really captivating. That's what makes people kind of really get excited about our sport. And the shot, let's be honest, doesn't always get the coverage. And sometimes, we've tried really hard, particularly within the Diamond League over the last few years, and the various meets we put them. The shots often been held in city centres and squares or in railway stations or whatever to bring people closer to the event, which is really important.
Appreciate how big the guys are.
Appreciate how big the guys are, but for them then to deliver a dramatic competition is it's not easy always to do that, is it? So sometimes but this year has been phenomenal.
That in mind, what are you most excited for 2020?
First part of the year will be working out. We'll have the World Indoors, and then the Olympics are going to come around really quickly, and we've got a packed Diamond League season early. Part this year. We actually start in April this year, and I think for me it's very different to last year in the way that last year was stretched out and you had to maintain your form and time it well, and there was time for those who'd missed the early part of the season to come back. There's not going to be any room for mistakes in 2020. A lot of the trials are early. A lot of them are in June. People will be going out to training camps in July. Is it July 31st, first day of the athletics? So we're sitting just months away from that. And so I think the first part of this, it's all right for us to sit and say, this is what I'm looking forward to. Who's going to be in what event? Who's fit, healthy, and who's doing what event? So I think ask us the question when we arrive in Tokyo.
And I love that.
Then I'll tell you.
Yeah, and I love that end of year. We call it the transfer market. And athletes have kind of gone, I'm looking for something different. I need to move. And I think that's been the key for me in the last probably 5 years or so. You've started to see a lot more mix of athletes moving to other countries, coaches sort of looking after multinational athletes, and I love all of that. And I think social media's helped massively with that. You've got friends now; they're all sort of you know, when back in sort of my day, you wouldn't be speaking to athletes through the winter if you weren't doing indoor or cross or road, and then you'd see each other again in kind of the May season, and then you'd be catching up with friends that you haven't seen for a while. Well, now it's sort of everyone's constantly in contact with each other, you know, and it doesn't matter
never
where
ends.
you're from. It never ends.
It never ends.
stops.
A lot to sort out at the end of the season. A lot to look forward to in 2020. But I think for now, thank you guys. Thanks for running through. And let's take a look at some of the highlights from the 2019 season.
I don't need recognition. I'm on a mission. I'm paying dues. I'm in position. I'm staying up. It's getting late. You're doing good. I'm doing great. Recognition. I'm on a mission. I'm paying dues. I'm in position. I'm staying up. It's getting late. You're doing good. I'm doing great. Recognition. I'm on a mission. I'm paying dues. I'm in position. I'm staying up. It's getting late. You're doing good. I'm doing great. Recognition. I'm on a mission. I'm paying dues. I'm in position. I'm staying up. It's getting late. You're doing good. I'm doing great. I had to let you go so I could grow and move. When time is of the essence, then it should improve. I had to leave to see what I could do alone. And when I get the money, then I'm coming home. I had to let you go so I could grow and move. When time is of the essence, then it should improve. I had to leave to see what I could do alone. And when I get the money, then I'm coming home. Recognition, I'm on a mission. I'm paying dues. I'm in position. I'm staying up. It's getting late. You're doing good. I'm doing great. Recognition, I'm on a mission. I'm paying dues. I'm in position. I'm staying up. It's getting late. You're doing good. I'm doing great. Recognition, I'm on a mission. I'm paying dues. I'm in position. I'm staying up.